Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder, and we are talking about the Billy Meier case. And I think I'll pick up in the Might of Thoughts roughly where we were before. And then we'll move on to some new material in the Way to Live book. And since I didn't get to talk about the mothership at all during the last show, we'll try to do a little bit of that. In case anyone's picking up one of these archives for the first time, I want to give you a little background information, and for those who know this, it certainly helps to connect the dots to hear it more than once. At least it does me, I have to say. Edward Albert Meier, he's about an 80-year-old man. He lives in Switzerland, about 45 minutes east of Zurich, in a tiny mountain village called Hinterschmidruti. That's nestled among the pine forests and the snow-capped mountains of northern Switzerland. He's written about 50 books. The books are originally written in German, and then many of them are translated into other languages like English. And if you pick up one of his books that's been translated and open it up, you'll notice that for example, I'm sitting on page 223 right now in The Might of Thoughts. Page 223 on the left side is German. Page 224 is the corresponding English. So you can go down one line of German and find the English associated with that. It kind of helps with finding specific German words. According to the Meier people, Billy writes his information in German in a kind of evolutive code. So there's something about which words are chosen and what order they're in that brings information out of these universal storage banks. And this does something to us subconsciously and unconsciously. It helps us with our evolution. And I think there's really something to that. I notice that whenever I look at the information in German and try to gain a little more understanding, it seems like it multiplies, is the only thing I could say. As I said, Billy has written 50 books, and these books are very, very interesting. One I've got here is called The Might of Thoughts, another one's called The Psyche, another one's called The Way to Live. And they're part of a bigger body of knowledge called the teaching of the Spirit. And this teaching is supposedly universal. In other words, there are people on other worlds that get information that's almost identical to this, very similar. It teaches us the laws of the universe. Our universe actually goes according to certain laws. The first law of the universe is love, effective love, non-romantic love, a love based on respect and reverence. The second law is the law of striving, and that's that everything has to work. To stay alive, everything has to work to evolve. And in fact, your happiness is dependent on your willingness to work, your willingness to improve. The third law, and one of the other laws, I don't know if you call this the third law, but is the law of reincarnation, which means our spiritual consciousness comes back to live again and again and again. In fact, for millions, even billions of years, our spirit form reincarnates in many different personalities many different bodies. Another creational natural law is the law of population. Planets our size, and typically planets with human beings are roughly our size, have a limit on the number of people that are supposed to live on these planets. It's about 500 million to a billion, and we're way over that. We're about 9 times over that now, 8 or 9 times higher than we should be. And this causes problems with all the other laws. It puts the whole planet under stress. We can talk more about that later. The other one is the law of harmony, I guess we call it. And it's harmony in our thinking, neutral positive thinking. It's the whole purpose of the book, The Might of Thoughts. There's the law of cause and effect. In other words, any action will have an effect. So if you chop trees down, they have a purpose. And doing that has a negative effect many times, because all of creation has a purpose. So these are just a few of the creational natural laws. And these people that Billy has had contact with since he was about 4 years old started to teach him at a very young age about these creational natural laws. Billy's first meetings were with a man named Svath, who was, I think I said on the last show, close to 900, but he was actually close to 1,000 years old. When he started to first meet with Billy, he would land his silvery pear-shaped craft in northern Switzerland, and Billy would go up into the ship. He would say he felt as if he was lifted up by ghostly hands, and Svath would take him into Earth orbit and show him the Earth from the high overview, plus give Billy an overview of what his life was going to be. He was told that when he was going to marry, and that his wife would be unfaithful. He was told he would lose his left arm in a bus accident. So his whole life was kind of laid out before him. Svath also put a device on Billy's head to protect his consciousness, not to mind control him, but to protect his consciousness from others who might try to attack Billy, those who were anti-evolutive in their attitude, who had their own agendas. The other thing it did, this device awakened Billy's abilities from previous lifetimes. You see, Edward Albert Meyer has been reincarnating on the earth for at least the past 13,000 years. He's been Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. And he taught this ancient universal teaching in all these other lifetimes. Svath was here to help him on this lifetime to get him back up to speed quickly so that his mission would go forward, because the people of the earth are ill in their consciousness, and these books help improve our thinking and straighten our thinking out, because our thinking is wrong. It's either most of the time negative or unrealistically positive. We're not neutral. We're not neutral positive in our thinking, and that causes all kinds of problems. We don't understand these creational natural laws, which I quickly just covered a few of them. So we're destroying our planet, and we're doing this in ignorance for the most part. So this show will help you control your thoughts, because your thoughts produce the circumstances in your life. Your thoughts inspire your feelings, and in turn your feelings generate more thoughts. So we learn skills on how to control this whole mechanism to keep it going in a healthy way. Billy was told about the importance of confidence. One of the things that Svath told him on the ship was how important it is to be confident. Much of our negative thinking comes from a lack of confidence, our self-doubt, our anxiety. And I'm plagued by this sometimes. Telling yourself you're confident, if you feel the negativity start in your thinking, Tell yourself you're confident. Break the cycle of negative thinking. Gain control over your anxiety so anxiety doesn't control you. Look to understand the unknown. There's usually an unknown that is causing your anxiety. Anxiety is controlled by the intellect. The term confidence means a feeling of self-assurance arising from one's appreciation of one's own abilities and qualities. And Swath told Billy that he must build up a great confidence for his future works, and we must do the same. Again, Swath would take Billy up in his ship. Billy was just 5 years old when this all started, and he would tell Billy about his previous lives. He would tell Billy about the atomic bombs that were going to be dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Swath told Billy that in the future there would be a secret dark order, a group of people which would take away our rights of self-determination. And in order to deal with all these difficulties, it would require Billy to confront his obligations and to build up a great confidence. And Swath told Billy, you must build up a great confidence for all your future and for all the success of all of your works, your tasks, your jobs and mission. And always know that you will accomplish everything and never fail. And he goes on to say, Swath told him, and only if you maintain the correctness of your thoughts and feelings, as well as of your work and actions in every respect, and also use your great powers of consciousness in this form, and you will be able to have true confidence in yourself, and do not allow this to be shaken by anything. Now, Swath people are human beings like you and I, and they live on a planet called Era, which is some 80 light years beyond our Pleiades. These people have been called the Pleiadians, but they're not from our Pleiades. The Pleiades contains only blue suns and stars that are not the right kind of stars to have planets around them that have life. You know, our star is mostly yellow in its color, and it produces the right temperature and the right heat to have planets that have life. The Pleiades doesn't have those kind of stars, but the Pleiadian star system does. And the planet that Swath lives on, or lived on, is very Earth-like, except it had a higher concentration of oxygen, as it did our Earth in the past, hundreds of years ago. Also, the Pleiadians live according to these creational natural laws that I was discussing earlier, which means they don't use fossil fuels, they don't mine their planet, they don't have roads on the surface of their planet, so their population is kept very low, around 500 million, and the forests thrive, they're gigantic. The atmosphere has no pollution whatsoever in it. They do not use radioactive materials to power anything. They live in complete harmony with nature. They have some very interesting ideas about how we should live. And they are at the 5th stage of evolution. There are 7 stages of human development. People on the earth are at the 2nd level of the ladder. The Pleiadians are at stage 5, just about the point where they lose the need for a physical body. So they only help out Billy to give information to the earth. Now, why Billy? People often ask, why is Billy contacted? Why am I not contacted? Well, it has to do with Billy's spirit form. The extraterrestrials, these Pleiadians, have the technology to look at and identify a spirit form. Your spirit form resides in the center of your middle brain. And they can look somehow with technology into a person's brain and see the spirit form. and say, oh, that's the reincarnated spirit form of so-and-so. In this example, in Billy's case, they would say that's the reincarnated spirit of Nocodamian, which was their teacher. And maybe we'll have time today to go over a little bit of the exploits of Nocodamian in the past. But as a young boy, Thoth would teach Billy many things, and one thing that he taught Billy was the importance of confidence. And he said, therefore, acquire confidence in the certainty that you will always maintain control. Billy also wrote a little thing called The Basic Rules of Man. When he did this when he was only 14 years old. And it says, each human being who wants to live according to reality must give to himself a good sense of self-esteem, self-confidence, and preserve it. In this way, regarding oneself, a healthy, self-sustaining, and progressive thoughts, feelings, and actions which can be realized. So that's our quick introduction for today's show. And before we move on, maybe we'll just listen to a little bit of music and then jump back into stage 2 with the might of thoughts. Well, hello everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. That little bit of music that you heard was called Disillusionment. If you want to Google Snyder and Humbert, you can probably order that at CD Baby Music Store if you want a CD of that. If you Google Ohio Exopolitics, you'll find the radio show is on Blog Talk Radio, which is probably where you're listening now. But it also can be found on Player FM and on TuneIn.com. So you can listen to this show at several places. If you're out on YouTube, if you Google Skills Solon, 2 words, you can see most of the shows have been put out on YouTube. And my friend from North Carolina, Skills Solon, puts these out there for people to benefit from. Everything that you hear me talk about is information that's written down in the writings of Edward Albert Meyer. And you've heard of the disclosure of the existence of extraterrestrial life. Well, the second stage of disclosure is learning the wisdom that these people bring. And we're learning how to control our thinking, how to keep our thoughts neutral, positive. And we learned the importance of confidence before the break. But Also tell yourself, I am optimistic, I am cheerful, I am relaxed, I am enthusiastic, I am thankful, I am in harmony, I persist, I persevere, I endure, I am calm, and I am satisfied. Because if you tell yourself these things, just by saying these things, it will help you to get your thoughts back in a neutral, positive state. We've been looking at a page in The Might of Thoughts. It's on page 224. It says, therefore, it is necessary to search for the source of the life power and to develop the power in order to have a reliable life potential upon which one can depend, therefore in which one can completely trust. This is a challenging passage for me. We have a life power within us, and it's called Lebenskraft in the German. The life power is actually your consciousness. Your thoughts have such a tremendous power that it affects your life, it affects how long you live, how healthy you are. It's all up to your thinking. Now, your good thoughts, your neutral positive thoughts, will produce good feelings. And your good feelings will produce more good thoughts, but they will also help to generate good habits. And then the good thoughts, the good feelings, the good habits produce good circumstances in your life. So you are the master of your own destiny. You're the forger of your own fortune. You create good circumstances in your life. So search for the source of this life power. Meaning, search for the thoughts that generate this life power in you. So the life power resides in our own thoughts. The source of the life power is created by ourselves, and it lies in our consciousness. It was an amazing thing for me to come to this, because I thought, wow, how can I possibly have this life power at my control? It just seems too much. Now, if you don't search for the source of the life power, if you don't have a good neutral positive thoughts, then a lot of times what happens is you get tangled ideas which confuse the thoughts. And these tangled ideas cause your thoughts to go from one extreme to another. This is called a misdirection of thoughts. They're bouncing back from one extreme to another. And this will trigger emotions in you. So you have to analyze yourself. Look into yourself. You find yourself you're getting triggered. Just try to breathe deep. Recognize, okay, I'm getting triggered. Why am I getting triggered? What is suddenly causing confused thoughts and misdirection thoughts? Why are these emotions rising up? And it's usually because we have ideas which are not completely and fully developed. It's also because our consciousness gets overburdened. And this relates to a genetic manipulation that we all suffer from. In ancient times, our galaxy was populated by a group of people from Lyra Vega. And they were extremely aggressive. And to the point, and maybe we can get to this, I'm hoping we can, in our normal course of discussion, get to this again. Because it leads back to Nocodamia, and it leads back to the Might of Thoughts. But these people were extremely advanced from Lyra Vega. And they started out in a different space-time configuration than we live in. Now, I didn't like this idea at first, but the Maya material says our material universe, first of all, is roughly egg-shaped, and it has 7 counter-rotating concentric circles within it. And the 4th layer is the material belt, where all the stars in the galaxies are. and the planets and et cetera, et cetera. Everything that's material is in there. All these other rotating rings are immaterial. They're energies. But within the material universe, it's divided again 7 different times in 7 different space-time configurations. The people from Lyra Vega that I'm talking about were in one of these other space-time configurations, but they came into ours. They came to the solar system. They left their space-time configuration. They came to our system. This is very somewhat complicated, long story, which I won't try to cover at all. But they were conquerors, and they kind of left the path, so to speak, of this spiritual teaching, and they took over many worlds. They came to the earth for a while. There were a group of them here on the earth that raised hell for a while, and there was a naturally developing earth person that was already here that had darker skin, and they abused these people, and they had a much higher technology and much higher material consciousness related powers, and the people of the earth were just beginning their evolution, and they were very abused by the people from Lyra Vega, this one group which was like a criminal group, so to speak. And I know this is a heck of a tangent I'm getting off on, but these people from Lyra Vega, which were abusing the native Earth humans, abusing the fact that they were higher evolved and mated with the Earth people, which they really weren't supposed to be doing that either. Another group from Lyra Vega came here and saw the crimes that were committed, and what they did is they took the group, the original group from Lyra Vega, which was abusing the Earth peoples, and took all their technology. So these people died on the Earth. Well, the law of nature is, one of the laws of nature, we're talking about the creational natural laws, is that the planet that you live on, the planet that you die on, is the planet that you'll reincarnate on. So if you travel to Mars, for example, and if Mars has an environment that will allow you to live, and there's a civilization there, and you die on Mars, even though you're an Earthling, when you reincarnate, you will reincarnate on Mars. And I don't think Mars has a civilization on it now, at least not one that lives on the surface. But the people from Lyra Vega were stranded here by their leaders, and that was intentional as kind of a punishment. So these people reincarnated on the Earth in later lifetimes in a much, much less evolved society. So you can imagine the kind of difficulties. That's a heck of a punishment if you think about it, because for many lifetimes you're just frustrated and you're just overwhelmed with the primitive, and you feel out of place, and it just would be a very, very difficult time for these people from Lyra Vega. So anyway, I'm getting back to the might of thoughts, I promise you. Because I was talking about our consciousness being overburdened. Well, there was one group from Lyra Vega that went to the Sirius system, and they decided to genetically breed out of themselves this warlike nature, because they thought it was terrible what the ancestors had done and abused all these different lower evolved peoples on different planets and destroying entire worlds and all of this. So they thought, well, we're just going to breed out of ourselves through genetic science the tendency for this aggression. Well, they found that they went too far, and they lost the ability to defend themselves. So they created a human branch off of their own genetics which had only 100-year lifespan, roughly, or 120 years, and had this tendency towards aggression. And one thing that would trigger these people is when their consciousness was overburdened, like too much information, too much going on, overstimulation. This would cause an aggressive reaction. And this, and the long story is, eventually those people were brought to Earth and Mars and another planet in our solar system, which was here hundreds of thousands of years ago before it was destroyed. So this genetics has been passed on here to Earth. So a lot of the struggle of our thinking that we have is related to this genetic manipulation, which allows us to be triggered easily. So when we get confused, when our consciousness is overburdened with too much information, our thoughts get misdirected and we are triggered easily. This is why we're so obsessed with sports and things, because hockey, NFL, the Ultimate Fighting Championships, the martial arts, all of these outlets for this aggression, well, it's a genetic thing that's part of our inner self. So, we learn the mind of thoughts in order to determine when this is occurring, so we can intercept this, because these tangled ideas can lead to murder and manslaughter. So what is tangled? Tangled can be defined as twisted together, untidily, matted. It means confused, jumbled, mixed up, messy, chaotic. Tangled can mean to bring together into a mass of confusedly interlaced or intertwisted threads. Tangled means a twisted mass of snarl. Tangled means an untidy mess of things that are not in a state of order. So tangled ideas do the following. They confuse the thoughts. They make the thoughts go from one extreme to another. They cause a misdirection of the thoughts. They trigger emotions. These emotions, if they go too far, can lead to manslaughter and murder. They push out all rationality and virtue and the consciousness. Irrationality starts to govern your consciousness. You can no longer set what are called seals or life determinations. You can't even imagine these things. Only these ideas can be followed. Now, what is an idea? An idea is an unripe, incomplete thought that causes all these problems. So learn to change your ideas, let them mature into ideals, and look for the flaws in your ideas. So the individual, you can be caught or trapped by your ideas, which rotate in your mind over and over and over again. So to convert the ideas, I-D-E-A-S, into ideals, I-D-E-A-L-S, you must thoroughly contemplate and work through your unripe, underdeveloped ideas. Recognize the values and the unvalues in them. Handle the values and unvalues. And work towards an evolutive striving. Work to retain the values, throw out the unvalues. Build in yourself an evolutive attitude and conform to that evolutive attitude. And eventually those unripe ideas, once you get the unvalues out of them, unvalues are things which are illogical. For example, you can have a psychopathic angriness, a continual angriness. That's an unvalue. You can have an inability to have deep feelings for people. That's an unvalue. Get those out of there. And then turn that idea into an ideal and create an inner persistence. And these ideas can be formed into ideals, and then you can avoid all the trouble that I was talking to you about before. I was talking about the Lyra and Vega people earlier. So I thought I would follow up that idea again, because one of these people from Lyra Vega is called Nocodamian. Well, that's a previous life of Edward Albert Meyer, same spirit form. And one thing that Nocodamian did was he came back from Arahat Athrasata, which is the 7th step in human evolution. It's a spiritual level. And he came back to help his people who were not following any creational natural laws and commandments. And he came back about 12 million years ago to bring his people reason and rationality. And he recognized his people's lack of understanding. And these people were very advanced technologically. They were advanced. They could destroy entire worlds, but they lost all perspective. He decreed a logical use of force because the people were so degenerate and murderous, and they were after power all the time. And these people had the audacity to violently spread out in the universe, and they called themselves the representatives of creation. They had this insane idea. They attacked foreign planetary system. They murdered millions, probably billions of people. And the people they didn't murder, they made slaves. And Nocodamian decided he would put a halt on their murderous, power-hungry deeds. It was very interesting because he ordained sterility, first of all, so they couldn't reproduce. And the people who did die a natural death were not allowed to reincarnate. Now, I don't know how that happened, something to do with Arahat Athrasata to stop the reincarnation. So these people are from 12 million years ago, maybe still on the other side. So when you die, what happens? Your Geist form, your spirit form, comes out of your body, and it takes with it the consciousness from the life you just lived, and you go into the spirit realm, kind of an energy band around our planet, and in that spirit realm, your previous life's experiences are evaluated, and all these different consciousness forms, love and discernment and logic and confidence, all these different things you've learned are distilled down into their essence, into their highest values. They're stored in the spirit form, and a new personality is created, a new consciousness in an area, in a storage bank called the overall consciousness block. Your spirit form creates the new consciousness for the new life, and it takes all these evolutive values from your previous life, all of your evolution. Spirit form absorbs those, so it gains power and intelligence, and those same evolutive values are stored in the subconscious of the new personality, of the new consciousness, and at the appropriate time, the spirit form and the new consciousness are placed in the body of a child 21 days after the sperm fertilizes the egg. And then the whole new life takes place. Now, for all that work in the spirit realm to get done, takes about a lifetime and a half. So if you lived 100 years, you should spend 150 years in the spirit realm to get all of that stuff done that I was just talking about. Because your spirit form has to process everything you did, all of your thoughts, all your impulsations, everything, and create these evolutive values, and then absorb them and create the new personality and the new consciousness. This takes a lot of time. Now, on a planet with overpopulation, there's not enough time to do all this. So we have to come back before all of that work is done. And it has very bad side effects. It can lead to a lack of maleness and a lack of independence. And this is part of the problems that are taking place on the earth. Overpopulation has tremendous, horribly bad problems, both in the spirit realm and on the physical side. And we're just starting to understand this, because here on the earth we'll destroy a whole wooded area and never think about all the trees we just killed. And that was home for all kinds of animals. And the effect that has on our environment. Because, the forests play a role in moderating the weather, because they absorb a lot of the warmth in the winter, and they don't allow it to reflect back. The trees do that. They'll absorb that warmth. If you have a barren plain full of ice and snow, all that light and heat is reflected back. But if you have a forest, it will retain some of that warmth in the summer. In the winter. In the summer, it does just the opposite. It maintains shade, which cools things down in the summer. So one of the things the forests do, besides producing oxygen that we need to live, is they moderate our weather. Well, we're destroying our forests and we're destroying our wooded areas all the time. And you notice every year the weather becomes more and more extreme. Well, this is part of what's going on. The other thing that forests do is that when the wind blows over the forest, it causes a kind of turbulence that spins this wind, which in turn causes and helps rain to happen. So if you knock all the trees down, you have droughts like they're having in California. And part of the fires are because of the droughts. And part of the fires are because of mismanagement of the forest, because we should be allowing the smaller fires to take place so we don't have all the dead fueled wood in the forest constantly. Now, there are also probably arson going on. There's a lot of people's ideas about weapons from space, and I don't know. It could be possible. But Billy has prophesied about the hurricanes and the rolling walls of fire in the United States, and it's happening. It's happening now. The fires have been outrageous. They're incredible. But I just want to point out the tremendous imbalance that overpopulation causes in both the spirit realm and the physical world. So we have to learn to control our thoughts in order to come to a rational conclusion on what needs to be done in order to solve so many of the problems that we have on this earth. Okay, I briefly covered some stuff in the Might of Thoughts. Let me move on. Since I talked about a whole bunch of stuff I didn't plan on talking about. I always do that, or I do that a lot, I think. I want to talk about striving, which is the second creational natural law that I talked about earlier. And this is on page 144 of the book called The Way to Live, part of the teaching of the Spirit that I talked about earlier. Let me start right here, I guess. I never know where to start. The human being who follows the creational striving longs for rationality and intelligent logic, recognizing and understanding. He or she wants direct insight and cognition, and he/she also wants direct experience in order to be able to understand and grasp everything in logical sequence. He/she also wants to base his or her consciousness-based and metaphysical ideas on his or her own direct experiences. Therefore, the human being wants to fathom, research, and recognize all his or her knowledge and his or her cognitions and insights from the deepest part of his or her inner self, precisely according to the creational natural law, being that ultimately all knowledge, recognition, understanding, and grasping in the experience for all things arise and can only arise out of the deepest depths of the human consciousness, and therefore from the innermost part of the human being himself or herself. All that can ever come from the outside is a signpost. So you determine what's true in your innermost self if you're thinking independently. And if you don't think independently, you won't evolve. Which shows the searching and researching human being who is striving for that which is higher and more absolutely fully developed the right way, which, however, is not to be found in the religions, in the religious, sectarian, and wrong philosophical as well as irrational worldviews. So let's try to break some of this down to get a better understanding of this. The German terms of interest here are streben, which means striving. Here's a very challenging word in the German. I've heard it pronounced Verlangt or Verlangt, and it means longing. It can have a lot of other meanings too, but you'll get where I'm coming from here in a little bit. Another term is Vernunft. Did I pronounce that right? Probably not. Which means irrationality. Einsicht means insight, judiciousness, discernment, access. So streben is the word for striving. It can mean to strive, to aspire, to pursue. It sometimes refers to ambition. In English, to strive means to make great efforts, to achieve or obtain something. So it said there at the beginning of that section, the human being who follows creational striving. So once you start down this path of learning this material and all that, you have a longing. And you start to long for rationality. You start to long for intelligence. You start to long for logic. You start to long for recognizing things and understanding things. So the human being who follows creational striving longs for rationality, intelligence, logic, recognizing, and understanding. He/she wants direct insight and cognition. And he or she wants direct experience in order to understand and grasp everything in a logical sequence. So this striving, this longing that comes with striving is something that you're bound to experience at some point when you're studying all this. Now I talked about the German word Verlangt. It's translated as longing in this passage, Verlangt. I've heard it pronounced that way. I think once we start down the path of this creational striving, we do start to experience a longing for knowledge. We want to fathom the deeper things. And it kind of takes you over in many ways. Knowledge, from what I'm coming to, all knowledge really comes from the inner self. So you can't force people to learn. It's impossible. However, it also means this Verlangt or Verlangt, spelled Verlangt. If you look up the definitions, it will tell you it can also mean requires, demands, craves, pining, which is a longing. It means to demand an answer sometimes. So you will start to demand these answers, so to speak. You go after them. So rationality means the quality of being based on reason and logic. So Vernunft, it sometimes pronounced like it begins with an F. Vernunft means rationality. So you start to long for rationality, reason, sanity, prudence, faculty of reason, common sense. You start to long for these things. Therefore, the human being wants to fathom, research, and recognize all her knowledge and her cognitions and insights from the deepest part of his inner self. Well, that's some very profound information. Let's see if we can't take just a slight break. Listen to a little music, and I'll finish things up here. Trying to get to a little song that you enjoy. This is a relaxing song. Okay, folks, we're back. This is Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. We're learning the Billy Meyer material, the spiritual teaching that comes from the Way to Live book, is what I was looking at. Before we took a little break, we were discussing the fact that all truth comes from the inner self. We're studying the notion of striving. It's the second creational natural law, and how striving produces a longing for more information. And the more you study this material, you'll understand that. I'm certain you will. I'm going to jump to a different topic just for ending the show, because I didn't get to talk about this at all at the last show. Supposedly, and of course I kind of take all this stuff at face value, in 1975, Billy, in one of his meetings with this extraterrestrial woman, Semyase, I talked about Svath at the beginning of the show, which was Billy's first contact, who Billy met with when he was a young boy. Well, once Billy got in his middle 30s, he started to meet with this woman named Semyase, and she took him on the beam ship out to Jupiter, where he supposedly got on what's called the Great Spacer, the mothership. So let me read just a little paragraph here. Billy on the mothership. It says here, "Yes, that's right." And this is Billy speaking. "We were talking about time travel and related things, and about this Great Spacer too. I would like to ask you whether I might be right about the following assumptions. Semyase has given me an explanation about the utilization of hyperspace, as you have already mentioned. As I now conceive the matter, the utilization of hyperspace, this phenomena that I have experienced earlier, consists of a real time travel offering all the possibilities of the past, present, and future, as well as other dimensions and spaces. Semyase has explained then that a hyperleap through an endless distances only takes a split second to happen. That means the mothership can jump from star system to star system in an instant, with basically no time passing. So, Semyase had explained that a hyperleap through an endless distance only takes a split second to happen. But unfortunately, I only noticed that correctly just now. Therefore, in my estimation, it doesn't consist of a simple hyperspace crossing, but of a time travel, through which space and time become paralyzed, something that would certainly not happen on a normal hyperleap. From that results, in my view, that the moment of the null viewpoint in the null time, space and time become paralyzed in the literal sense of the word. That is, they become pushed together, if I can put it like that, whereby an absolute timelessness arises, and also a spacelessness. The time and space can then get traversed with immeasurable speed in a split second without any shifts or distortions. When Semyase uses the hyperspace within the small beam ship, it must consist of the same principle. By the way of using the hyperspace, it must also be possible to do a time travel, also in still time. But what one appears at the aim location right in the same section as one disappears from the starting point. So they go from the starting point to the ending point instantly. from my estimations, it does not deal with another thing than with a technically generated dematerialization and rematerialization. So they dematerialize at their current location, they rematerialize in another location. And then he calls it time travel. But I don't think it has to be time travel. Yeah. When the time travel is carried out in present time, okay, he's saying it gets complicated. Only then can one see virtually no time pass while everything remains free from shifts and distortions. Now, that was Billy speaking. This is Ptah, who is Semyase's father, who commands the mothership. Ptah, by the way, was the son of Sva, Billy's first mentor. I have already told you that you are extremely perceptive and that you dispose of a very remarkable combination of logical skills. However, once again, you generate in me feelings of astonishment. Even creatures of our race would have difficulties in finding the truth from the sparse amount of information given by Semyase. Billy says, it wasn't so difficult. Ptah says, it is indeed a great accomplishment. It is time now, however, to interrupt our talk for a few minutes. We have reached the point of transmission. So Ptah and Semyase turn to the instruments at this horse-shaped console. Small light bodies light up, and the dark picture screen becomes alive shapes that are completely strange to me, Billy speaking here, to me appear on them. And for the first time I hear a tone, now very faint and somewhat singing like metal. I look up at the transparent dome, and I see that the stars of all sizes go by very quickly and suddenly merge into a milkish white veil. This only takes a few seconds, and now they are already recognizable as bright stars again, passing by at a tremendous speed. But that only lasts a few seconds as well, and they go slowly like before. During this whole time I feel somewhat weird, but I feel a very profound peace. And then I hear the voice of Semyase, which surprises me. Since Ptah had asked for silence, I wondered if something had to be delayed. So Billy has experienced a hyperleap. The mothership has jumped from one star system to another. And he just described this experience, what it looked like. And later the mothership will make larger and larger jumps, and he'll experience more and more bigger hyperleaps. And right now they're about 500 light years from Earth, which is pretty amazing. So anyway, a lot of information that we covered here today. We talked about the might of thoughts and how tangled ideas can lead to confused thoughts and even murder and manslaughter. We've also talked about the way to live, and that striving leads to a kind of longing for more profound information. And then we spent a little time there at the very end with Billy on the mothership. You've been listening to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. Thanks for listening, and hopefully we'll be back. We have some guests lined up for the coming week, and we'll talk to you later. Have a great evening.